Welcome to this afternoon's talk. I have the pleasure of introducing today Chelsea Peterson-Salahuddin, who is an assistant professor at the University of Michigan in the information school there. Her research focuses on the ways that marginalized communities engage with communication technologies, including today specifically TikTok, and the ways that those groups seek information, produce knowledge, and build community. And then also the ways that the kind of infrastructure and affordances of those platforms can help communities do that, but also kind of reinforce existing systemic racism. Okay, so she recently won a dissertation award for her work from a National Association of Journalism and Communication Researchers. And an interesting tidbit that I thought you guys might find interesting is that before her work in academia, she worked and won awards as an editorial producer for CBS This Morning. Okay, so let's give a warm welcome to Chelsea, and I'm looking forward to the talk.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. As Kristen said, my name is Chelsea Peterson-Salahuddin. I am an assistant professor at the University of Michigan School of Information, and my talk today is entitled Teachable Moments, TikTok Social Drama as a Site of Black Feminist Intellectual Production. So just to give you a quick overview of how my talk's going to go today, I'm going to give like a quick introduction of myself, maybe talk about some of the things that Kristen talked about and build on them a little more, thinking about my approach to work. I'm then going to talk kind of broadly about the work that I do in terms of online communities, and then talk specifically about work that I've done on TikTok, drama, and Black feminism. And then I'm going to end with maybe some closing thoughts. So hi, my name is Chelsea Peterson-Salahuddin. As I said, I examine how racially marginalized communities, most often Black women and femme folks, engage with mass and digital communications technologies to find information, create information, and build community. And I'm also really interested in how these technologies infrastructures can continue to replicate or help these communities overcome systemic barriers to equity. And so to do this, I often use Black feminist theory and theories from critical technology studies as grounding analytical lenses to examine user interactions with digital technologies and or journalism and mass media. So Black feminist theory, ew, we froze for some reason. Sorry, guys. Did the Wi-Fi? The Wi-Fi's on. I don't, but I'm also frozen. Sorry, technical difficulties.
I'm like nervous to shut it down.
Oh, there we go. Oh no, now it's just going. Okay, well, hopefully this, okay. So picking up where I left off, Black feminist theory is a counter-hegemonic framework developed from Black women's unique lived experiences that really pushes us to think about people's lived experiences based on an integrated analysis and the idea that major systems of oppression, such as racism and sexism and classism, are not distinct and separate, but really interlocking and really impact people's social, political, and economic lives in really dynamic and often unforeseen ways. And then critical technology studies is kind of this approach to thinking about technology and how it's situated both socially and culturally, and really acknowledging that the way in which a lot of our, especially corporate-owned technology, has developed really sees kind of the default user of most of our technology as being white and male, which really impacts the design of most of these technologies, especially when minoritized people are using them. And also the understanding that the way in which technology is designed comes with ideological and epistemic underpinnings that really shape how people interact with and experience these technologies. And so to engage in these theoretical approaches, I also mainly engage in qualitative methods, which is also informed by my theoretical approaches. So I often engage in qualitative methods such as semi-structured interviews, focus groups, qualitative surveys, and ethnography. And in large part, this is because Black feminist theorists often argue that to truly understand the dynamic and unforeseen ways that systems of power and oppression shape people's everyday lives, we need to actually be talking to people, right, to understand what their lives are like and how are we to understand them. And additionally, when I am often examining digital content, I engage in critical technocultural discourse analysis, or CDTA, which is a multimodal approach to the analysis of digital objects developed by Dr. Andre Brock that simultaneously takes into account the material and digital design of technology alongside the socioculturally mediated use of said technologies for discursive and cultural meaning making. So in practice, this is kind of how my research often breaks down, though it is important to note that the categories I'm about to describe are not necessarily mutually exclusive. So when focusing on information creation, I have often done projects that examine how Black women and femme folks use both mass and digital technology platforms, such as websites, blogs, social media, and even thinking about television shows to share news and information centered on their lived experiences. I've also engaged in a series of studies that examine how Black and women of color navigate our contemporary information ecosystems to find information they feel is most helpful and useful to their everyday lives, sometimes thinking about specific topics such as news and political information. And I'm often thinking about the role that digital platforms play in aiding or creating additional barriers for them to accessing this information. And then finally, in my focus on online communities, I'm really interested in how racially minoritized communities, again, especially Black women, use digital platforms as a space for community building. For today's talk, I am mainly going to focus on my work on online communities. And usually when I'm engaging in these projects, I'm specifically asking how do racially marginalized people, particularly Black women and femme and queer folks, use often corporate-owned social media platforms where they are not imagined as the default user to engage in connection and empowerment, and how do they navigate the various types of harms that they may experience on these platforms. So for example, in my study of platform Black feminist communities on the app formerly known as Twitter, now X, and Instagram, I was interested in examining the collective role of hashtag discussions, which I kind of situate as counterpublics, as a key site of intellectual production for Black women and for Black feminist theorizing. And so previous studies had examined Black women and femme and queer folks' use of specific hashtags to discuss topics from a Black feminist perspective, but at the time these studies had not yet examined these interactions as a whole across a range of hashtag discussions on these platforms, or specifically from a user perspective. So most of them were looking at the content that was published, but not talking to the people who were engaging in these conversations and why. So in this study, I really tried to center people in my exploration of this online community to understand the experiences and motivations of users who engaged in these conversations and how the social and technological structures of these different online platforms differentially shaped their experiences. And throughout the study, I use this term platform Black feminist communities to refer to these social media-based communities often formed around hashtag discussions based on Black women's unique lived experiences. And I conducted semi-structured in-depth interviews with people who created, popularized, or participated in Black feminist hashtag conversations on Twitter or on Instagram. So I first interviewed the hashtag creator, and then I used a snowball sampling technique to find other people who had participated in the conversation. And through talking to these users, I found three main things. First, these platform Black feminist communities operated as communities of care for those involved. So many participants joined these platforms often at their inception to find and organically build community with other Black people and other Black women, especially if they lived in a place where this community was not available to them offline. And the conversations that they had allowed these Black women and femme folks to connect to and affirm each other's lived experiences. And these conversations also developed as a manifestation of what Black feminist scholar Bell Hooks terms talking back, or what I call in this case, posting back, in which Black women would talk back to or respond to what they saw as stereotypical and incorrect mainstream depictions of themselves. Second, due to socio-political shifts over time, particularly the 2016 presidential election in the US, and the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement around 2014, 2015, many of the people I spoke to said they began facing more instances of misogynoir-based harassment on the platform. For those of you who don't know, misogynoir is a term by scholar Moya Bailey to talk about the specific race and sex discrimination that Black women face often in popular culture. And as a result, participants said their behavior on these platforms became a lot more tempered. So they would say less and block more. However, in being more guarded with their engagement practices, participants shifted away from the kind of open community building that was really key to this community in its early development. And third, while many participants noted the crucial role that these platforms had in amplifying their messages and helping them to reach new people and new audiences, due to the unforeseen ways that viral hashtags disperse online, many of the hashtag creators in particular often said that the meaning or use of the hashtag that they created often changed over time, and in some instances, other people took credit for the hashtag that they created. Often people with arguably more social privilege, right? A really big example of this that I talk about in this paper is hashtag Black Girl Magic, which is really not used in the way in which it was originally developed by Kashawn Thompson, who created the hashtag. And so I argue this erasure, which is in part fueled by a lack of intellectual property laws online and on social media, parallels historical patterns within the US of erasing and taking for granted Black women's intellectual production, such as the stealing of Black enslaved women's inventions and denying of their patents. So if you are interested in hearing more about this project, the full study was published in Social Media and Society in 2022. But for most of today's talk, I want to spend my time talking about my more recent work in this area, examining the intersection of drama and Black feminism on TikTok. And again, this full study was also published last August, so a couple of months ago, in Information, Communication, and Society, if you're interested in checking out the full study after this talk is over. And here, I turn my attention to the Chinese-owned social media platform TikTok, particularly because of its importance as a mainstay of communication for younger social media users, especially those from Gen Z. And TikTok is often described as the fun social media platform, right? It allows users to engage with one another in fun and creative ways, which really affords high levels of interactivity between users. But this interactivity also affords more opportunities for what we typically think of as drama, right? So, Scottish cultural anthropologist Victor Turner developed the concept of social drama to understand the structured social interactions of conflict within a group that share common interests, values, or histories. And the main actors in these social dramas often occupy a position of importance within the community, such as journalists, politicians, celebrities, and other well-known thought leaders. Social drama, as Turner defines it, usually consists of 4 public stages. The first stage is breach, which occurs when someone within the community publicly violates a cultural value or rule, challenging community norms. In the second stage, crisis, actors within the community publicly deliberate the infraction, judging the action, and taking sides. In the third stage, redress, procedures are put in place to address and limit the spread of the breach, including anything from a public or private advice or apology to forms of mediation and legal processes. And finally, if and when redress is successful, the final stage is reconciliation or the reintegration of those involved in the breach, restoring peace in the community. The social dramas are really social and political processes that help define and solidify power around particular norms within a community. So media scholars have drawn on this social drama framework to understand kind of how social media users engage the affordances of platforms to narrate dramas. And in short, affordances are the features and structures of technology or object that make available or constrain users' engagement with it. And particularly as it's been used in technology studies, affordances are not only inherent to the physical design of an object, but can also be perceived differently by different users depending on the environment. And media scholars have also argued that digitally mediated platforms, so social media platforms, make social dramas visible outside of mainstream press institutions and also opens up a wider range of public actors or high priority value members of the community to be involved, right? So including things like citizen journalists, bloggers, and social media influencers. Some specific affordances of TikTok as a social media-based platform include things such as interactivity. So like many social media platforms, TikTok's features afford interactivity through the ability to like, comment, share, and repost other users' videos, alongside platform-specific features such as stitching, which allows users to attach their video with another user's video, duetting, which allows users to split screen their video with another user's video, and comment replies, which allows users to reply to a comment directly in a video. The ability to upload a video in-app using a smartphone with a front-facing camera allows for the affordance of persistence of video recording, right? So it's being archived on there. And it also allows for a certain amount of digital intimacy, right? Through a direct address to camera as if you were talking to the person on the other side of the screen. TikTok features also afford creativity by allowing users to post in multiple mediums of expression, such as images, video, and text, and audio, and then through the inclusion of in-app editing features. And finally, and interestingly, TikTok's most defining feature, which is its For You page personalization algorithm, which is the default user page on the app, offers users often the perceived affordance of anonymity by connecting and sorting users into networked communities, or what people often call sides of TikTok, with other unknown users based on an ever-changing understanding of their interests, maybe as opposed to offline relationships, as people are often organized on other social media platforms such as Facebook or Instagram. And recent studies have highlighted how TikTok users really draw on these platform features and affordances to engage in social activism and political discourse around systemic racial, gender, and sexual marginalization and power, finding that users are often drawing on the affordance such as interactivity through using stitching and duetting features to call certain things out, the intimacy afforded by the platform's kind of casual nature to kind of in a fun or casual way comment on racism, sexism, and homophobia on the platform, mainly centering on either perceived injustices of the platform governance itself against minoritized communities or injustices happening within society more broadly. And also through the use of creativity, right? So using audio memes and engaging in kind of TikTok native challenges to call out certain instances of oppression. However, it is still unclear how these same affordances are then used to negotiate racial, gender, and sexual power dynamics between users on the platform as a larger community. And I thought TikTok presented a really illuminating site to examine kind of drama surrounding specifically race, gender, and sexual power dynamics through a social drama framework, given not only the platform's novel affordances, but also its emerging demographics, right? So TikTok boasts over 1 million monthly active users, global active users, 150 million monthly active users in the US alone. And approximately 60% of those users are part of Gen Z. And so this gives younger Americans who traditionally hold more liberal views around race and social justice an outsized role in defining platform norms. And to clarify here, I am not suggesting that younger users are the only ones involved in these TikTok dramas. However, these demographics highlight that Gen Z users play a large role in the user-driven actions and discussions on the platforms. So applying the social drama framework to TikTok can give us insight into how the platform's predominantly younger user base set norms around social issues and power inequities by engaging in rituals through the platform's specific affordances outlined previously. And lastly, I was really interested in how Black women and femme and queer folks on TikTok may use these platform affordances to address platform norms around race, gender, and sexuality, specifically as a form of digital Black feminism, which Dr. Catherine Knight Steele defines as how Black women, men, and non-binary folks espouse Black feminist principles and politics through online and digital practices. So really with this study, I was interested in thinking about how do TikTok users, particularly Black and of color women, femme, and queer users, utilize drama to negotiate and set intra-platform norms around intersecting power dynamics of race, gender, and sexuality by engaging platform affordances and rituals, and what are users' responses to these dramas revealing about the socio-political norms that platforms, predominantly Gen Z user base, aim to establish. And so to examine this relationship between social drama, affordances, and digital Black feminism on TikTok, I engaged in a critical technocultural discourse analysis of videos surrounding two US social dramas on TikTok: feminist influencer Chelsea Hart's sexual misconduct allegations against Indigenous influencer Lance Totsi, commonly known on the platform as Womblands, and New York Times critic Lena Wilson's sexual harassment claims against Amanda Stenberg. And just really quickly, how many of you know about these dramas before I continue, are aware of them? One. Okay, not many. Oh, cool. Nice. I think this will be a nice discussion then. So I chose these two social dramas, one, because the main actors in all of them occupied a position of, quote, high value priority within the TikTok community. And this was either due to their known status or celebrity status, journalists, actors, or their influencer status. Second, both of these dramas kind of began and unfolded on TikTok, right? Making these discussions and negotiations of power really specific to the TikTok community. And lastly, both cases present interesting and complex dynamics for thinking about intersections of systemic privilege and oppression. So both dramas were kind of started when a white queer person, in calling out perceived misogyny, right, transgressed a community norm around racism, misogynoir, and racialized sexism in how they chose to call out individuals of color. So to do this analysis, I collected videos engaging with these two social dramas in kind of two distinct phases. So in the first phase, I engaged in a digital ethnography informed exploration of the platform to find videos about these dramas. So basically what that means is I drew on digital ethnographic methods, and after encountering each initial breach in my own TikTok usage, I went for the subsequent week following that, I followed different videos that I saw would come up about the drama. And when available, I would download these videos using TikTok's save function. So this resulted in about 43 videos about Womblands and about 6 videos about Amanda and Lena Wilson. And then in the second phase, I used PyTalk, TikTok scraper in R, and scraped videos of TikToks using keywords Womblands, Lena Wilson, Amanda Stenberg, and variations of these keywords, and downloaded all the results posted in the 2 weeks following the initial breach. So this resulted in about an additional 195 videos about Womblands and 174 videos about the interactions between Lena Wilson and Amanda Stenberg. I then watched all these videos and deleted all the videos that were not necessarily related to the drama itself. So this resulted in a final set of about 270 videos about Womblands and 149 about Lena Wilson and Amanda Stenberg. And to analyze these videos, as I said, I used CDTA and I used Atlas TI to code these videos for how TikTok creators use the technological affordances of the platform and how they thematically responded to the drama. Also, in following CDTA's provocation to interrogate critical technocultural analysis with theory that, quote, draws directly from the perspective of the groups under examination, end quote. While I analyzed all the videos in my data set, my analysis engaged Black feminist theories to examine the culturally specific ways Black and of color women, femme, and queer creators engage these affordances as a practice of digital Black feminism. So Next, I'm just going to go over some of my key findings from this. And in line with previous studies of social drama theory in kind of media and communication studies, I use the social drama theory kind of as a scaffold for my analysis here. So specifically organizing my findings according to the public stages of the social drama framework. Specifically, the first two, breach, where I describe the moment when the actors involved in the violation breach in the community happened, and how things transpired, and crisis, where I analyze how kind of more generally users on the platform engage with platform affordances in videos to discuss and debate these actions. And within this stage, I organize findings thematically to reflect how TikTok creators use platform affordances to express their values. I also want to note that while I only included kind of public TikToks in my sample, in photo and video examples that I will provide in this presentation, I do cover users' faces and handles to maintain their anonymity. And this is really in recognition that I am bringing, well, it's public material. I am bringing this material into a different context that it was originally intended for. The only faces that I left not covered are those influencers and celebrities at the center of the drama whose identities have already been made publicly available in news articles about the conflict. So first, we have Womblands. So on March 2nd, 2022, a white femme TikTok influencer, Chelsea Hart, shared a video to their over 1 million followers accusing fellow TikTok influencer, Indigenous activist Lance Totsi, of manipulating them into having an unsafe sexual relationship. So in their video, Hart claimed that they had been pursuing a romantic relationship with Totsi for the last 6 months, and believing their relationship to be monogamous, had decided to visit him and engaged in unprotected sex. However, less than 24 hours after returning home, Hart said they saw a video of Totsi that he posted of himself seemingly on a date with another person, leading Hart to publicly accuse Totsi of manipulating them into an unsafe sexual relationship and violating their trust. So initially, many people on the platform, many users, particularly women, rallied around Hart, calling out Totsi for his misogynistic behavior. However, the video also did spark some racist and white supremacist lies about Totsi, who had already been the target of racist attacks because he used his platform to call out white supremacy using the catchphrase, "Hey colonizer," which he may or may not have also taken uncredited from an Indigenous woman. In response, Totsi posted and later deleted a video apologizing to Hart. In the apology video, he emphasized that the relationship with Hart was a friendship, implicitly countering Hart's claims that their relationship was romantic, and he did not address the claims of sexual misconduct that began to grow with Hart's accusation, and rather labeled the incident a matter of, quote, miscommunication, unquote. Since there was really no consensus, though, about what the breach was, Totsi's apology, at least for Hart, was not sufficient redress. So we did not move to the next social drama phase, and therein, the drama continued into crisis. Notably, in Hart's response video to Totsi's apology video, they impassionately stated, "I have an ache deep in my womb, Lance." However, due to the way Hart blended these words together and viewers' assumptions that they may or may not have been appropriating a little known Indigenous word, across TikTok, womb, Lance became Womblands, which is now a new word on Urban Dictionary. So users from across TikTok use the platform's features such as text on screen, funny audio, and remixing of Totsi's and Hart's videos together to comment on and or provide a comedic take on the situation, particularly around the question of whether Hart weaponized their tears and vulnerability as a white woman. Now, here it is important to note that kind of in the midst of all of this drama, Hart did come out and say that they identify as non-binary. But most of these initial reactions were people interpreting and understanding Hart's actions as a white woman specifically. So throughout US history, white women's presumed helplessness has been used as an excuse to harm Black and Indigenous people. As Akapati notes, this phenomenon of, quote, white women's tears, end quotes, often allows white women to avoid facing their privilege and reproduces systems of oppression, reaffirming the status quo. Therein, despite the very real harm that Hart endured, TikTok users used interactivity and creativity within the platform norm of fun and humor to highlight how the continued digital circulation of their tears prompted other white users to come to their defense in the form of racist attacks, not only against Tutsi, but also against an arguably innocent Indigenous woman. So in the days preceding Hart's accusations, Tutsi reposted a video from an Indigenous woman creator referred to on the platform as Witchy Twitchy, leading Hart's followers to believe Witchy Twitchy was the quote unquote other woman in question, harass her, and mass report her account. Using the green screen feature, which allows users to make an image or video as the backdrop of their own video, Witchy Twitchy used a video of Hart posting telling their users not to harass her as the backdrop to their video, as they observed, quote, the anti-native rhetoric that this has validated and spawned all over TikTok has been insane. And all this from a white woman in the name of feminism and defending and believing women. It's like when your favorite TikTok creator gets harmed, you throw all of this intersectionality out the fucking window. So here, Witchy Twitchy used the perceived interactivity provided by the green screen feature to hold Hart accountable for privileging their interpretation of feminist solidarity to perpetuate racist attacks against a woman of color through the lens of intersectionality, a term and analytical framework developed by legal studies scholar Kimberly Crenshaw that draws on Black feminist theory and critical legal studies to examine how multiple intersecting axes of oppression shape people's social, political, legal, and economic lives. Several creators also use TikTok sounds to mimic and comment on Hart's public videos, engaging in what Zuli and Zuli term imitation publics on TikTok. While many white creators also use sounds to mock Hart or make analogies to other experiences like lactose intolerance, Black and of color women, femme, and queer users specifically often engage this feature to call out how Hart's actions perpetuated misogyny and racism. Take, for instance, this video.
You knew. You fucking knew.
Here, a non-binary creator who identifies as Latina and Indigenous in their profile used a sound that Hart put out in one of their many videos about this, saying, you knew, you fucking knew, with the caption, when I had a feeling a certain someone was fetishizing Indigenous and Native American cultures, to call attention to what other creators noted was Hart's use of an Indigenous vocal fry in the phrase, almost as if it was mocking. As a video-based platform, many Black and of color women and femme creators also use the app's recording and video editing features to teach their audiences about the nuances of how the varying power dynamics of those involved in the drama coalesced. For instance, in one video, a Black woman creator faces the camera dressed casually in workout clothing with her hair in a messy bun and gives an intersectional analysis of the ever-growing web of drama.
I say this all the time and I might keep having to say it, but multiple things can be true at once. And if y'all were really into intersectionality like that, you would know for sure that multiple things can be and are often true at once. When there's a situation or a problem between people of different marginalized identities, those nuances are always at play. So a man of color can 100% deal with racism and white supremacist rhetoric and death threats due to white supremacy and false accusations. Yes, that can be true. But because he's a man, he still benefits from misogyny and patriarchy. So if a couple of white women say, hey, this man was being sexual predatory to me or lied to me and didn't allow me informed consent, that can also be true. However, because white supremacy has used white women's pain and tears as a tool to perpetuate white supremacy and racism onto people of color, so much so that some white women lie, it makes sense for some people to be hesitant. And even in cases where it is 100% true, still there's a nuance of this white woman's tears and pain is going to be used to threaten the life of a man of color and to enact white supremacy and racism. That can be true. It can also be true that the black woman who got roped into this is getting way more judgment and less benefit of the doubt than the person who's actually being accused because she's a black woman and she deals with misogynoir. So that can also be true. And it can also be true that a woman of color that's not even fucking involved, but solely because she's a part of the same marginalized identity as the man accused, will deal with racism, white supremacy, misogyny, because society goes so far to protect the tears and pain of white women that they will go to scapegoat anybody. And it can also be true that white women know that's how society responds to them. And that if they present their pain and tears in a certain way, they will get a response and they will get the protection that the privilege gets them. And it can also be true that even though white women might know that, they're not prepared to deal with the consequences of that, the negative consequences of their very valid pain and story. When it comes to intersectionality, nothing is black and white. And we cannot look at situations where people of multiple different marginalized identities are involved and look at it as black and white. Because these systems of oppression create so many different nuances, it's impossible to do so. So people really need to start looking at certain things through the lens of intersectionality.
So here, this user draws on TikTok's recording feature to really have an intimate conversation with the viewer and create a really persistent record, an archived record on the platform, really demonstrating an intersectional analysis of kind of how this web of drama is unfolding and really teaching people how to understand it in a sense. And now we move on to Wilson versus Stemberg. So on August 18th, 2022, film critic Lena Wilson, a mask presenting lesbian, took to TikTok and Twitter to post a video calling out actor Amandla Stenberg for what she perceived to be harassing and homophobic messages from the actor, whose movie, Bodies, 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 Wilson had just reviewed for the New York Times. The message read, "Your review was great. Maybe if you had taken your eyes off my tits, you could have watched the movie," which Wilson, again, suggested was a harassing and homophobic message. So in the video, Wilson said she didn't, quote, want anything else to come of this, end quote, but she posted the message because she didn't want this, quote, person who has more social power than her, end quote, to think that it's fucking okay to do something like this. Sorry, there's the end quote. So initial comments responding to Wilson were supportive. So users apologized to Wilson in the comments and in videos for the harassment she endured and echoed the belief that Stenberg's message was in fact homophobic and questioned whether a male critic would have received the same response. However, as the days went on, users began to question the appropriateness of publicizing Stenberg's once private message. Many commenters also noted that in her video, Wilson neglected to mention that in her initial review of Bodies, 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 she wrote, quote, "The only thing that really sets Bodies, Bodies, Bodies apart is its place in the 824 hype machine, where it doubles as a 95-minute advertisement for cleavage and Charlie XCX's latest single," end quote. Which was presumably the line that Stenberg was responding to in her message. So the following day, Stenberg, who also identifies as queer and non-binary, posted a response video saying that they thought the message was hilarious and meant to directly address the claim that the film was a 95-minute advertisement for cleavage. And Stenberg also said that as an actor with larger breasts, they often feel hypersexualized in Hollywood. However, TikTok users still wanted some redress from Wilson here. So several Black and of color women, femme, and queer creators, alongside a handful of white femme and queer creators, used the stitch feature to respond directly to Wilson's claims. Notably, many Black and of color women and femme creators used the Stitch feature to call out the racist and misogynoir implications of Wilson's sexualization of Stenberg in her review.
There is so much history of white people sexualizing Black women, and not only that, but using the sexuality of Black women to discredit them. So no, I don't really think Amanda was that crazy for saying something about you staring at her tits when she's the star of the movie, and when you say that the whole movie was an advertisement for cleavage, which is also just completely inaccurate and gross. At most, you can say that Amanda's DM was unprofessional as an actress and passive-aggressive. It was a private DM. Amanda did nothing to try to hurt Lena's reputation, so I don't see why it was necessary to post on TikTok and on Twitter about this DM interaction.
Oh, sorry. So here, like with Womblands, the Stitch feature not only allowed for interactivity, but also allowed marginalized creators to use Black feminist theory as a frame to highlight how Wilson's actions perpetuated racist and sexist rhetoric around Black women's bodies. After Wilson began receiving increased backlash, she set her TikTok account to private, disabling comments and stitches before eventually deleting her account. However, in response, many creators began, again, using that green screen feature to edit screen recorded and downloaded versions of Wilson's videos into their videos as a way to reply directly to her claims. So for instance, a Black woman creator stitched another user's video who had previously stitched Wilson's video before she deleted her account, again, to respond to the situation with this insight.
This, which I'm just gonna let speak for itself for a little bit.
I'm fascinated by this, right? I'm not fascinated because of like the whole dynamic between Amanda and Lena, because Lena was clearly in the wrong. I'm fascinated by just how many white women are propping up Lena Wilson right now. Like, I'm not surprised, but it's really the discourse of watching it go back and forth that fascinates me. Here's why. Because white queer people are marginalized on the axis of queerness, right? So to a certain extent, they understand the language of marginalized spaces, but only for their own benefit. And that is what we are all watching play out right now. They don't understand intersectionality unless it impacts them. Because posting a private DM that nobody had to know about and then acting like you're a victim of homophobia completely ignores the fact that Black queer people exist. And that the very person DMing you is Black and queer. Deals with hypersexualization, which Lena's review did. I hate being the one to say this because it's such a fucking cliche, but if the roles were reversed, white queer people would be incensed. It's reverse racism vibe.
So using the perceived interactivity afforded by TikTok's green screen feature, these creators found a way to respond directly to Wilson's video to teach viewers about the politics of privilege and oppression within the queer community and through the lens of intersectionality. Finally, several Black and of color women, femme, and queer creators also use the platform's editing feature to creatively frame a larger argument around what they perceive to be the problematic nature of Wilson's video. For instance, the creator in the stills featured here edited together snippets of Wilson's video alongside screenshots of anonymous posts from Wilson's peers, articles about her family members, her dad also is a journalist, and Wilson's old TikTok videos to frame the interaction within a larger understanding of Wilson's larger racial and class privilege. The creativity afforded by TikTok's editing feature allowed Black and of color women, femme, and queer creators to provide evidence to help walk viewers through how they understood and interpreted Wilson's disclosure and accusations against Stenberg and reframe Wilson's words and actions within a Black feminist framework. So what does this all mean? What am I talking about? So in 2021, a TikTok creator posted a video asking, is there any community on TikTok where there is no drama? In response, creators from all corners of TikTok, from the knitters to the beekeepers, stitched the video recounting the drama that unfolded in their little TikTok communities. And this study really talks about the importance of drama as a mechanism through which younger social media users, and particularly Black women, femme, and queer social media users, increasingly assert Black feminist norms and progressive values and principles in digital spaces and communities. Using the social drama framework really as a scaffold to analyze these videos reveals how in each incident, First, users drew on-platform affordances and features to highlight how white creators' experiences of harm did not necessarily prevent them from wielding their racial and class privilege to perpetuate harm and oppression against creators of color, particularly women and queer creators of color. Users pushed for new community norms around how platform users cannot wield their marginalized identities to oppress others. And examining these events through the social drama framework positions them as a process through which TikTok users negotiate norms around power dynamics on the platform. Further, the imagined and perceived affordances of the TikTok platform really informed how users responded to the drama. So in line with previous studies of activism and political discussions on TikTok, these users engage platform affordances, particularly interactivity and creativity, and especially the platform's audio-visual editing features, to respond to the drama in often mimetic, joking, and jestful ways, reflecting the platform's norms around sociality and fun. And finally, these dramas allowed Black and of color women, femme, and queer users on the platform an entry point to dissecting and re-articulating these dramas through the lens of Black feminism. At the same time, affordances were used in distinct ways in each drama. So in You Womb Lands, commenters drew on digital intimacy and persistence as a pedagogical tool. In the Wilson-Stemberg case, commenters used creativity and editing to build rebuttal commentary, like activists on the platform, engaging the platform's simple editing tools as part of their rhetorical creative practices. Still, this analysis found really narrow pathways for redress and reconciliation, which are our two other sides of the social drama framework. So in both cases, as users looked for a form of redress, many began to turn to social media's most prevalent form of accountability, canceling, an expression of agency in which users take their attention away from something or someone to hold them accountable that is uniquely enabled by the capitalist demands of social media. These findings do echo previous social drama studies on social media that have found few rituals for redress in the digital age beyond canceling. However, if we situate canceling as a Black discursive practice of accountability, as Meredith Clark argues, to hold those in power to account, these instances of canceling may reflect the shifting power dynamics away from hegemonic norms by marginalized communities on TikTok. And further, the violence enacted through these social dramas still ended with material harm befalling women of color, in this case, both Witchy Twitchy and Amanda Stemberg. As Trevor Buffone argues, TikTok often operates as a, quote, white space because of the default logics of whiteness as a norm often structures the technological underpinnings of the platform, and in turn, behaviors on the platform, making it another tool of white supremacy. Thus, while Black and of color women, femme, and queer people continue to engage in Black feminist intellectual production on TikTok, these actions are always to be taken against the larger structures of whiteness embedded into the platform. And so I argue these findings may be important for helping to contextualize how we understand the relationship these younger users have, particularly Black women and femme and queer users, towards social media spaces as a site of connection and education and community building. So as many of you may know, on Saturday, January 18th, following a 9-month legal battle between ByteDance, the owner of TikTok, and the US government over the US government's concerns about data privacy under the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversaries Controlled Applications Act, TikTok temporarily ceased operations in the US after failing to sell the company to a new US owner. However, less than 24 hours later, the application was back online in the US after President Donald Trump, who at the time was set to be inaugurated and sworn in as the 47th President of the United States 2 days later, said he would issue an executive order to delay the enforcement of the congressionally passed bill. Specifically, when reopening the app that Sunday morning, US-based TikTok users were greeted with the following message: "Thank you for your patience and support. As a result of President Trump's effort, TikTok is back in the US. You can continue to create, share, and discover all the things you love on TikTok." This message then directly tied the app's reappearance to a president and an incoming presidential administration that has been repeatedly accused of using language and enforcing policies that are racist, sexist, homophobic, and transphobic. So beyond the specifics of the TikTok platform, I suggest that many users' responses to both the platform's impending disappearance and reappearance can be contextualized in part within this study's findings. So First, in the wake of TikTok's impending disappearance, many users used memes, jokes, and direct address on the platform to question not only the motives behind the platform's ban in the US, but also to identify alternative platforms they saw as suitable for their online gathering space.
Can we protect ourselves? I got it! Let's all buy a Krabby Patty!
We should lock our doors!
We should call my nephew!
We should dig a moat! We should take Bikini Bottom and push it somewhere else!
Okay. Ooh. So, as the video exemplifies, many users promoted the Chinese-based social media app RedNote as opposed to Meta-owned US-based platforms, Facebook and Instagram, due to both its structural similarity to TikTok and its platform ownership and policies, which were seen as distinct from and arguably adversarial to the conservative incoming US presidential and legislative administration. Second, upon the platform's reappearance, many Black scholars and educators, particularly Black women scholars, began using the platform to teach mini courses on topics related to race, gender, the economy, gardening, which users jokingly began referring to as Hillman Talk University, a reference to the fictional HBCU in the late 1980s, early 1990s sitcom, A Different World. And in this way, we continue to see how these moments of contention, both on and off the platform, create moments for learning through the lens of digital Black feminism and just pedagogy in general. So as a closing thought, I want to leave with this thought on the resilience of online communities for teachable moments through recording artist Doechii.
I just wanted to come on here and say goodbye. This has been super fun. This has been really cute. Love this app. This is great. I'll be on the next one. I'm on RedNote, so you can find me there. Also, to all the kids that are stressing out about TikTok, and you guys relax. We survived Vine. You'll survive too. Bye.
Well, I'm going to end here. Thank you so much, and I welcome your questions.
All right, folks with questions. Okay.
Hi. I completely understand that this was studying the the effects of sociocultural kind of sociopolitical conversations on TikTok between minorities. However, I think if you ever spent any time on any predominantly white or predominantly Republican spaces on TikTok, it's filled with pure hate, and that seems to be growing day by day, especially after President Trump's inauguration. And with people refusing to move off TikTok once it was banned, and even moving to platforms with more restrictions against suppressions of certain governments or quote-unquote extreme social values, and with TikTok actually recently suppressing terms related to Democrats and anti-Trump content, which increasingly is about defending one's own identity. So this kind of content is inherently being suppressed. And also certain identities, such as just transgender individuals, are being suppressed more and more as after President Trump's inauguration. How do you think this will impact the narrative of Gen Z at large, especially since those that are not in the loop or in a community of any queer or minority spaces may not be exposed to these kind of social issues as the platform continues to suppress these ongoing issues?
Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, so I think with this, I was really focusing specifically on dramas that were trying to negotiate kind of racial, gender, and kind of sexual power dynamics. That being said, there are other parts of TikTok, right? And I think as I talk about, right, this is always balanced against kind of the overwhelming whiteness of the platform itself, right? And the governance policies of the platform itself. I think that being said, I don't think the platforms necessarily dictate communities and users and how they necessarily tend to relate to each other, express each other on the platform. So that being said, I think repression of certain terms, words is about platform governance policies, right? But that doesn't necessarily stop people right, from engaging in community. And these communities also can exist offline, right? So I don't think these are the only spaces where this is necessarily going to happen or has to happen. And I think that's why people were like intentional about like not going to a Facebook or Meta, right? Because while I'm not saying that there isn't also repression and oppression on Red Note or on Chinese owned apps, right? The way they're doing it is very different, right? So for instance, on Red Note, you couldn't say MAGA, right? So it's not that repression wasn't happening, but was happening in a different way, I think particularly to attract that adversarialness of what that community wanted to push against, right? Not to say they don't have their own government's issues, right? But specifically thinking about what that community wanted to talk about. So I think kind of thinking about like the We Survived Vine thing, I think that this kind of like overwhelming whiteness of society and technology has always happened and communities still persist, right? And so I think I'm still hopeful, right, that these kind of community dynamics and conversations will continue to exist where people want to develop them. But as you said, right, TikTok may not be that place anymore, right? That's what people are trying to figure out and responding to. Just like a generation before that, when a lot of Black women and who were Gen X were having conversations on Twitter, that is now X, started moving off of that space, right? Because it was no longer welcoming to the kind of communities and conversations they wanted to have anymore. But the communities themselves didn't necessarily go away. So I'm hesitant to say that just because this app is changing or these spaces are changing, that those conversations and dynamics will change, because those kind of technological assumptions of like whiteness and privilege have always kind of been there. And people have always tried to figure out how to re-navigate around them. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Any other questions? Oh yeah.
Thank you. Hello. I just want to say thank you for your talk. It was wonderful. And I just had a question about I'm not sure what it was called. It was the drama steps or the social steps.
The social drama framework.
The social drama framework, yeah. So it's 4 steps, and it starts with breach and ends with reconciliation. And this was written like 40 something years ago, I assume, because you said 1980. So I was just curious about what you think is upcoming, for example, with the rise of hate lately, because early 2010s we saw there was like a decrease of hate. There was a decrease of or there was an increase of understanding of the social frameworks in America. And now I believe that there is less of an understanding of that. And so how do you think the specific steps are going to affect that? Or how do you think the future of that will be like?
Yeah, I don't think the steps of the social drama are going to change. What tends to change, or what we agree, are the community norms, right? So I think a good way to think about that is like what you were talking, you said there was like more, I guess, and if I'm using the wrong word, please, like acceptance into, I don't think there was more. I think there was a norm around what was socially acceptable to say at that moment. And I think that norm has shifted. I think that's what's different, not the steps of the drama itself, but what we consider a breach of the drama in the first place, right? So historically, being openly racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic wouldn't have been a breach, right? And then we moved into this place where it became a breach. So you didn't say those things. And now we are moving into a time where people are saying that's not a breach anymore. You can say those things, right? And that's for a myriad of reasons. But I think that's what changes, not so much the steps, but what causes a breach in the first place.
Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Is there any other questions? Okay, Stuart.
Thank you so much for your talk. It went in so many different areas, and I'm kind of thinking in particular, I think we think a lot about like debates between technological determinists and sort of more social constructionists about like how much does the design of the platform and these affordances make an impact in terms of the resolution or the way that kind of culture gets constituted or sort of power gets sort of played out. I'm curious, after sort of doing this research, maybe like before you did it and then kind of after, how much you kind of feel like those affordances of TikTok kind of made it into something that either was something that, you know, this could have happened on another platform and this could have played out in a similar way with different affordances, or actually no, because of those ways, the things that you highlighted, you know, actually the design of TikTok as that kind of video app with all those features really did make it a different kind of thing. Do you kind of feel like you're more on one side or the other after this?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm on more than one side of the other. I do think that there are specific affordances that just TikTok allows people to do. They allow them to do more that kind of informed how they went about doing it, right? Like the joking and the jestfulness and the audio memes, right? But I think also some of the affordances people were using were perceived, right? Like the green screen feature wasn't necessarily created for people to respond directly to someone, and yet that is the way in which they were using it. So I'm still in, it's a little bit of both, right? Like I'm not a technological determinist. I also think people operate within systems that are created, but people change those systems, and social structures and perceptions of those systems also impact how they're used. So I don't know, that's my take.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Oh, there's an online question? Okay, do we have time for one more? I did not bring my watch with me. Okay.
So this question is from Ayumi Matsuda Rivero. She says, first, thank you very much for your talk. As a grad student who looks at marginalized communities on TikTok, it's given me a lot to think about. Her question for you, you investigated the relationship between different dominant and marginalized groups, but I wonder if you noticed any differences within a marginalized group.
I don't know if I notice any differences within. I don't know if I'm only looking at dominant groups, right? Because like I think a lot of the people who were involved in these, especially the people who kicked them off, right? Like they experienced certain types of oppression. They also were wielding certain types of privilege. So yeah, I don't know if I noticed like within group differences. I don't know if that was something necessarily that I was looking for here. But I do think that what was interesting about these was I don't think it was like there's a dominant and there's a marginalized group. I think it's like, how do we sort out the web of like the way we wield our privilege when we are also an oppressed group, right? Because just because the way that, like, for instance, Hart called out Tsotsi may have violated some norms, it doesn't mean that he wasn't misogynistic and didn't do something to harm her as a femme person, right? So yeah, I don't know, but that's a good question. And I think that's an interesting thing to potentially look at for future.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much to everyone. Let's offer a final round of applause for
Thank you.
And I'm sure if you have any other, questions that you could come up to the front and ask them individually.
Yeah, you can ask me. You can also email me. I'm not really on here and I haven't really set this one up, but I do answer my email.